If you've ever typed ADHD into a search engine, you know what a mess it is out there. It's just this minefield of conflicting opinions, personal stories, and frankly, a lot of myths. So today, we're going to cut right through all that noise. We're going straight to the science, using the incredible work of Dr. Russell Barkley to build a really clear, fact-based picture of what ADHD actually is. So let's just start with the biggest question, the one that really fuels the whole debate. Is ADHD some kind of character flaw? A lack of willpower? Is it just a trendy excuse people use for being disorganized? Or is it a real, legitimate medical condition that's based in biology? Because the answer to that question changes absolutely everything. All right, so let's tackle the biggest myth head on. Is this thing even real? Forget the TikToks and the Twitter debates for a second. What does the actual science, the medical literature, have to say about it? Well, the evidence is just staggering. We are talking about hundreds of thousands of research papers. And this isn't some new fad, right? Dr. Barkley points out that this has been in the medical books since 1775. The scientific consensus here is crystal clear and completely overwhelming. ADHD is absolutely a valid medical disorder. So what is it exactly? Well, the clinical definition is that it's a neurodevelopmental disorder. Fancy words, but all it means is that it's about how the brain develops and how it's wired. It's not a choice, it's not bad parenting. In fact, the genetic link is so powerful that it's right up there with autism and bipolar disorder. And we don't think of those as character flaws anymore, do we? Okay, this brings us to one of the most popular and honestly most seductive myths out there right now. The idea that ADHD isn't a disorder, it's actually a gift, a superpower that helps you be more creative or become a CEO. It sounds great, but Dr. Barkley warns that this narrative is actually incredibly dangerous. And here's where the story just falls apart. The myth says ADHD gives you this special edge. But the science, the actual research, shows that incredible people like Olympian Michael Phelps succeed in spite of their ADHD, not because of it. And they often have a really hard time in areas of life outside of their specific talent. And that whole higher creativity thing, study after study shows it's just not true for the vast majority of people. So why is this myth so harmful? Well, think about it. If ADHD is this wonderful gift, then why would we need to provide support or accommodations in schools and workplaces? Dr. Barkley makes it clear that this kind of talk threatens decades of hard-won progress, things like the Americans with Disabilities Act. It totally devalues the very real, very serious struggles that people with ADHD face every single day. So if it's not a superpower and it's not a choice, what's actually going on here? Let's dive into the neurological reality and look at the real causes of ADHD. Okay, look at this breakdown. The overwhelming majority, like almost all cases of ADHD, are biological from the get-go. About 65% of it comes from the genes passed down in your family. Another 10% comes from random new genetic mutations. The last quarter is linked to other things that physically affect the brain's development. And if you need one single fact to really drive home how genetic this is, here it is. If one identical twin has ADHD, there is a 75 to 80% chance the other twin has it too. That is a massive number. It just goes to show how deeply this is written into our biology. And what about that other 25%? Well, that's biological too. We're talking about things like complications during pregnancy, being born prematurely, traumatic brain injuries, even things like lead poisoning or the kind of severe neglect we saw in Romanian orphanages. The point is, every single known cause of ADHD is something that physically impacts the brain. Now, for a really long time when we talked about ADHD, we only talked about focus and hyperactivity. But there is a huge piece of the puzzle that's been overlooked, and Dr. Barkley argues it's one of the most important parts of the disorder, the emotional side. We're not just talking about being frustrated because you can't focus. We're talking about poor emotional regulation as a core feature of ADHD itself. It's that impatience, that quickness to anger, that difficulty just managing your emotional responses. And it turns out this one thing is one of the biggest predictors of the real-world problems people with ADHD run into. And you can see how this just creates this devastating ripple effect through someone's life, right? It's the number one reason people with ADHD struggle socially. It's linked to things like intimate partner violence because of those huge overreactions in the heat of the moment. It's behind impulse spending, road rage, and it can have a terrible impact on your career. Yeah, just look at the professional world for a second. Dr. Barkley's research found that this emotional piece is the single best predictor of getting fired from a job. Adults with ADHD get fired 3 to 4 times more often than everybody else, and a lot of the time it's because employers just won't put up with those explosive emotional reactions. Okay, so after all that, I know it can sound pretty bleak, but it's really not. Understanding the reality of ADHD is the first and most important step toward managing it. And for that, Dr. Barkley gives us a super clear 5-part plan for success. So here's the playbook. It all starts with a proper evaluation. You got to see an expert who really gets it. Then it's education. You have to become the world's leading expert on your own brain. Medication is often the single most effective tool we have. After that, it's about practical changes. Accommodation, which just means changing your environment to work with your brain, not against it. And finally, modification, which is using therapies like CBT to build new habits and skills for the long haul. You have to understand, this isn't just an academic topic for Dr. Barkley. His life's work is driven by something deeply personal. He lost his own brother, who had ADHD in a car accident at age 56. He also lost a nephew to suicide, driven by that same impulsivity. It's a powerful reminder that getting this right isn't just about making life easier. Sometimes it's literally a matter of life and death. So we end here. We've looked at the science, we've busted the myths, we've seen the real-world impact. The final question really isn't just for people with ADHD, it's for all of us. Now that we know the facts, how do we, as a society, shift this entire conversation away from judgment and misunderstanding and toward real, science-based support and compassion?